Don't look him in the eye, the servant beside Viola hissed, her pace brisk and unforgiving. The corridor before her stretched endlessly, each step bringing her closer to a fate she couldn't quite name. And don't ask him questions. He's the Alpha King. He doesn't answer questions. Oh, but don't show fear either. He absolutely hates that. Viola's lips twitched despite herself. Is there anything His Majesty doesn't hate? Whatever you do, do not make jokes, the servant replied, giving her a look. Viola's brief flicker of humor died. The stone walls seemed to press inward, suffocating, yet somehow the walk wasn't long enough. She focused on putting one foot in front of the other, her worn shoes whispering against the polished floor. The palace was beautiful, all soaring ceilings and golden light, but it felt like a gilded trap. Too soon they arrived before massive double doors. 2 guards flanked the entrance. The girl is here to see His Majesty, King Emrys, the servant announced. The guards exchanged a look. She isn't as pretty as the usual ones, one said. The other nodded. And His Majesty sends even the gorgeous ones away. You're wasting your time. Heat flooded Viola's cheeks. She opened her mouth to protest. She wasn't here for that. But the words died in her throat, wasn't she? Her stepmother's words echoed in her memory. The king requires a new attendant. You'll serve him personally. Don't embarrass the family. The way she'd said it, the cold calculation in her eyes, Viola understood now. Noble families sometimes sent daughters to court with unspoken purposes, not for marriage, for other arrangements. Viola's stomach turned. Gods, they'd sent her to become His Majesty's mistress, hadn't they? It wasn't enough that she'd had to serve her own family, her step-sibling and mother for years like she was staff. Now they'd given her away to be played with and disposed of like a toy but their monarch. Well then. Viola lifted her chin. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. It's all right, she said, steadier than she felt. If His Majesty doesn't like me, I'll leave instantly. Before she could brace herself, they shoved her through the doors. The lock clicked behind her with terrible finality. The antechamber was smaller than she'd expected, almost intimate. Rich fabrics draped the windows, casting everything in shadow. Her wolf stirred uneasily, recognizing the Alpha's power before her human senses could. His scent saturated the air, wild, dark, dangerous. Her instinct screamed at her to lower her eyes, to submit. She stayed still, not defiant, just waiting. And then suddenly, a voice. "Who are you?" it growled. The voice came from the shadows, deep and sharp as a blade. "I'm Viola, Your Majesty," she murmured, feelings quite small. "My family sent me to—" "Leave," the voice snapped. She hesitated. "I said leave," the Alpha commanded. Viola flinched, turning toward the door, then froze. The king made another sound, low, pained. And then he was cursing. Against every instinct screaming at her to obey, to run, Viola turned back. Her feet carried her forward, through the antechamber toward the adjoining room, toward the source of that sound. The living quarters beyond were dimly lit, a fire crackling in the hearth, and there, the king sat near the window, his hand pressed against his temple, jaw clenched in obvious pain. He hadn't heard her approach. "Are you all right?" The words escaped before she could stop them. His head snapped up. His eyes, piercing gray, furious, locked onto hers. For the first time, she truly saw his face. Strong features, dark hair. Handsome, she realized with a jolt, beneath all that rage. "Who gave you permission to come in here?" he snarled. Viola's breath caught, because that's when she saw it. The wheelchair. The fearsome Alpha King, the monster everyone had warned her about, the man who'd sent countless women fleeing, couldn't walk. She stared, unable to hide her shock, and his expression turned to ice. Chapter 1. 3 days later, Viola was fairly certain the king wasn't going to make her his mistress, and it had nothing to do with the fact that he was in a wheelchair. It was the suspicious, wary looks he sent her, as she cleaned his private chambers, that made it obvious. He watched her like she might slip poison into his tea or set fire to his curtains the moment he blinked. Whatever her stepmother had hoped would happen here, it wasn't going to. She'd been relegated to cleaning duty, something the palace staff had called nothing short of miraculous, because the king barely let anyone inside his rooms. Most servants were dismissed within days, sometimes hours. One maid had lasted exactly 20 minutes before fleeing in tears. But Viola had made it to day 3. She moved carefully through the antechamber, dusting shelves with meticulous attention. Every item had to be replaced in its exact position. The curtains had to be drawn precisely halfway. She'd learned these rules quickly, by observing the king's reaction, growls, and growing tension whenever he was displeased. Like right now. "Surely, you must be done by now?" The king's voice cut through the silence, making her jump slightly. "Almost, Your Majesty," she chirped, dusting faster. He watched her from his wheelchair near the window, papers spread across the small table before him. His jaw was tight, shoulders tense. "How long does it take to dust a shelf?" he asked. "Not long at all, Your Majesty," Viola said. "Just being thorough." "You've been thorough for the past 10 minutes, he snapped. Viola's hands moved faster, her heart picking up speed. She could feel his eyes boring into her back, could sense his impatience thickening the air. "Yes, my stepmother used to get frustrated with me all the time as well," she heard herself saying, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "How long does it take you to make a bed, Viola?" "Shouldn't have spent all day cleaning the floors, Viola." "I'm just slow, I'm afraid," she explained. "It's because I'm clumsy. Whenever I try to hurry, you can be sure I'll break something, and then I'll grow even more nervous. Perhaps break another, and then—" "All right," the king interrupted. "I get it, just clean in silence." "Oh, I can absolutely be silent, Your Majesty." Viola hurried to agree. "Silent as a mouse. You won't even notice I'm here, that I can assure—" He gave her a look, sharp gray eyes fixing on her with the weight of command, and she snapped her lips shut, nodding quickly. Silence settled over the room again, broken only by the soft whisper of her cloth against wood and the occasional rustle of paper as the king worked. Viola tried to focus on her task, but she couldn't help stealing glances at him. Her wolf was constantly aware of his presence, even when she wasn't looking. The alpha's power hummed beneath his skin, a living thing that made her instincts skitter between wariness and something else. Recognition, maybe. Not submission. She'd never been good at that. But awareness. He had strong forearms, she noticed. The sleeves of his shirt were rolled up, revealing scarred skin and corded muscle. His hands moved across the parchment with practiced precision. "What?" he snapped suddenly, not looking up. Viola froze, heat flooded her face. When he turned toward her, visibly annoyed, she blurted, "Nothing. Was just looking at your really strong forearms. I mean, not that they look, too strong. They're perfect. I mean, the right size." The king sighed, a long, weary sound, and went back to his paperwork. Viola bit her lip hard enough to hurt and returned to cleaning with renewed determination. She would not speak again. She would not look at him again. She would be invisible and efficient, and she watched the tension in his shoulders, the stiffness in his posture. Pain seemed to hover around him like a shadow in the way he shifted in the wheelchair, as if his body wouldn't let him rest. It must be awful, she thought, to be trapped like that. To have been a warrior and now be confined to a chair. No wonder he was harsh. "Why were you cleaning your stepmother's floors?" he asked suddenly. The question came without warning, his voice cutting through her thoughts. He still wasn't looking at her. Viola stared, surprised. "Your Majesty?" she asked, feeling dumb. "Doesn't your family own a dukedom?" the king insisted. He'd remembered. She'd mentioned it only once, that first day when he'd demanded to know her lineage. "They do, Your Majesty," Viola said. "But after my father remarried, She trailed off, uncertain how to explain without sounding pitiful. How could she describe becoming invisible in her own home? Being relegated from daughter to unpaid servant while her stepfamily lived in comfort? Surely the king wouldn't care about her troubles. "He what?" the king asked, impatient. He was looking at her now, papers forgotten. "They needed help around the house, that's all," Viola said softly. The king's head snapped up fully, his expression turning furious. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "I don't like liars," he said, each word precise and cutting. Viola went very still. She could feel her wolf instinct screaming at her to lower her eyes, to submit to the alpha's displeasure. But she wasn't lying. She hadn't lied. Still, she knew better than to snap back at an angry king. Her stepfamily had taught her well. When someone more powerful than you was angry, you stayed calm. You waited for the storm to pass. "You will tell me everything," the king continued, his voice hard as stone. "Answer all my questions, always. Is that understood?" Viola nodded slowly, keeping her expression neutral, her posture non-threatening. "Yes, Your Majesty." The king stared at her, his gray eyes searching her face for defiance or fear, but Viola held his gaze steadily. She had nothing to hide. "Your family owns a dukedom," the king said. "Yet you claim they needed you to clean their floors?" Now Viola understood. He thought she was being evasive. Protecting them, perhaps, or making excuses. "Yes, Your Majesty," she said calmly. "They own a dukedom. They did not need me to clean, but after my father remarried, his new wife decided I should." The king's eyes narrowed. "Explain." She swallowed hard and told him. Not everything. She couldn't bear to lay out every humiliation, but enough. How her stepmother had gradually transformed her from cherished daughter to servant. How her stepbrother and stepsister delighted in her degradation. How her father had grown distant, too weak or too willful to intervene. The king listened in silence. When she finished, something flashed across his face, almost like shame, as if he regretted asking. But the softness lasted only a moment. "I told you that window needs to be locked 3 times, he said sharply, his gaze sweeping the room. "You've only done it twice. Start over." Viola bit back a sigh. She'd locked it 3 times. She was certain. But she crossed to the window and checked each lock carefully, testing them one by one while he watched. 3 times, she confirmed quietly. "I saw you only do it twice," the king said. "I must have checked it earlier, Your Majesty, before you—" "Are you arguing with me?" he snapped. "No, Your Majesty." Viola unlocked and relocked each mechanism 3 times, slowly, deliberately, while he watched. When she finished, she turned back to him. "Is there anything else I can do for you before I leave, Your Majesty?" He looked surprised by the question, as though unused to anyone offering rather than fleeing at the first opportunity. For a long moment, he simply stared at her, something unreadable moving behind those gray eyes. He shook his head and then, "I apologize," the king said suddenly, quietly, "for calling you a liar." Viola blinked in surprise. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she said softly. She curtsied, careful, proper, the way her mother had taught her years ago, and left quietly. Chapter 2. King Emrys didn't enjoy the way Viola lingered in his mind. He rubbed a vicious hand over his weary, sleep-deprived eyes, trying to scrub away the memory. But it persisted. The soft touch of her gaze when she'd looked at him, not with pity or fear, but something gentler, sadder. How she'd unwillingly confessed her story, her voice barely above a whisper. Enough. He needed to move. Being confined to his wheelchair made his inner wolf restless, volatile. The beast prowled beneath his skin, demanding release, demanding action. Staying still was torture. So he stood. His legs took his weight easily as he crossed the room in long, powerful strides. The floorboards creaked beneath his boots, a sound he'd learned to hate because it meant someone might hear, might know. He wasn't stuck in his wheelchair, not anymore. He just needed them to think he still was, to underestimate him so he could finally expose them when they'd least expect it. He paced, each step grounding him, releasing the tension coiled in his muscles. "No one is that gentle," he muttered bitterly to the empty room, "not when they've experienced betrayal." His jaw clenched. He resumed pacing with renewed vigor, his mind spinning through possibilities, connections, plots within plots. "I will learn her game," he told himself. "She cannot be real." A quiet knock sounded at the door. Emrys flung himself toward the wheelchair, landing in it just as the door opened. He was breathless, wild-eyed, his heart hammering. But it was Flora. Relief crashed through him even as his hands gripped the armrests hard enough to hurt. His sister's eyebrows pinched slightly at his harassed appearance. "Where have you been?" he almost barked. "I sent for you hours ago." Flora crossed the room with her usual grace, extending her hand to him. "I'm sorry, brother. I came as soon as I could." He clasped her hand in his, pressing it to his forehead. The touch steadied him, familiar and safe. "There are enemies all around me, Flora. I need you close," Emrys said, releasing a shaky breath. She ran a comforting hand through his too long hair, a small smile on her lips. "We've been through this. Your enemy is dead. You must stop this. You're safe. I'm here." He wanted to believe her. Gods, how he wanted to believe her. But the doubt gnawed at him, relentless. The feeling of being out of control, of missing something vital, it was suffocating. "Have you been losing track of time again?" she asked gently. He snapped away from her touch, wheeling backward. "The new servant girl, what's her story? Why is she here?" he barked. "You mean Viola?" Flora blinked, clearly confused. "She was a gift, I believe." Emrys waved a hand impatiently. Of course he already knew that. "But what do her family have to gain by sending her here?" he insisted. Flora's expression softened into something unbearably sympathetic. "Nothing, Emrys. Only your favor. You are the king. Your people wish to please you, that's all." Emrys pulled away, wheeling himself to the window. The lights of his kingdom spread out below him, thousands of tiny flames against the darkness. So much responsibility. So many lives depending on him to see the threats before they struck once more. "I don't trust her," he said quietly. Flora scoffed. "She's more mouse than wolf." Emrys sent a glare over his shoulder sharp enough to cut. Flora had the good sense to look chagrined. "What would you have me do, Your Majesty?" she asked. Emrys visibly flinched at the formal address from his own sister, but he recognized it for what it was, confirmation that she would help him. "Nothing elaborate," he said carefully. "I don't want to spook her. If she's caught up in a wider plot, then I will root it out before she has a chance to flee." His voice hardened with firm resolution. "They won't escape this time, Flora," he declared angrily. "Not again." Flora's mouth twisted, but she said nothing more. With a dip of her head, she left him to his thoughts. Chapter 3. Viola had discovered that the palace kitchen was her favorite place in the entire castle. It was warm, always smelling of fresh bread and herbs, and the head chef, a gruff man named Benedict, had actually engaged her in conversation this morning. That felt like progress. She stood at the preparation counter, carefully arranging ingredients: honey, vanilla, cinnamon. 3 drizzles of honey clockwise, she murmured to herself. 1 spoonful of vanilla counterclockwise, 2 spoonfuls of cinnamon distributed evenly on top. Benedict glanced over from his dough. "All that for porridge?" "The king is particular," Viola said, reaching for the honey pot. "I noticed he barely touched it the first morning when I didn't follow the order exactly. Yesterday I got it right and he finished the entire bowl." Benedict's eyebrows rose. "Guess that's why you've lasted this long. Most don't make it past the first day." Viola smiled as she worked. The deliberate clockwise drizzle of honey, the counterclockwise stir of vanilla, the even distribution of cinnamon. Every movement was intentional. This was what the king had asked for. "You know," a voice said beside her, "he really can't tell which way you stir the honey." Princess Flora stood at the counter, her appearance sudden and silent. She wore an easy smile, but something assessing lurked in her gaze. "The only thing that actually matters is the cinnamon," Flora continued. "These little details, they're excessive. You could save yourself so much time." Viola looked at the perfectly prepared porridge. "This is what he asked for, Your Highness. I don't mind. But he'll never know if you don't." Flora's tone was conspiratorial. "You could skip the fussy bits." "Perhaps," Viola said carefully, "but he asked for it this way." Flora watched as Viola reached for the tiny tasting spoon. Another requirement. She was to taste every dish before serving. "What are you doing?" Flora's tone sharpened. "Testing it, Your Highness. The king asked me to taste his food." "Viola." Flora straightened, urgency entering her voice. "You don't need to do that. That's paranoid and excessive. Honestly, it's insulting to the kitchen staff." Viola hesitated. Was it excessive? Benedict hadn't seemed offended. and the king had been very clear about this rule. "I'll cover for you," Flora pressed. "I'll tell him I instructed you not to waste time. He won't question me." It would be easy to listen, to skip this step, save time, avoid awkwardness. But the king's voice echoed in her memory. "You will follow my instructions. Always." "I appreciate the offer, Your Highness," Viola said quietly, "but the king gave me specific orders. If he wanted me to skip the tasting, he would tell me himself." "Viola, really?" But Viola had already dipped the spoon and brought it to her lips. The porridge was warm, sweet, perfectly balanced. "It's good. I should get this to him before it goes cold." Flora said nothing as Viola left, but she could feel the princess's eyes on her back. The king had accepted the breakfast without comment. No criticism meant she'd done it right. When Viola returned to the kitchen, she found it empty except for Flora, who sat at the wooden prep table staring at nothing. "He wasn't always like this," Flora said without looking up. Viola paused. The words felt weighted. Flora lifted her gaze. "I should explain myself. What just happened when I urged you not to taste his food? It was a test of your loyalty to him." A test. She'd been tested without knowing it. "You passed, though," Flora continued, "and I'm so very glad you did." Viola sat down across from her, mind reeling. "Why did he need to test me?" Flora's chest rose with a heavy breath. "Because he's consumed by paranoia," she said. 6 months ago, my brother was poisoned by his childhood best friend and Beta, Seamus. They grew up together, closer than brothers, and Seamus tried to kill him for the throne." Viola's hand flew to her mouth. "That's awful." "Seamus delivered the poisoned wine himself," Flora said. "Then at the last second couldn't go through with it. Knocked the glass away, saved Emrys's life. But the damage was done. The poison had already started working. It paralyzed him, left him in that wheelchair." Flora's hands clenched. Seamus confessed. Said he wanted the throne. He was executed for treason. "Gods," Viola breathed. "But Emrys can't accept it." Flora leaned forward. "He's convinced Seamus was working with someone else. That there's a conspiracy. That the real enemy is still out there. So now he tests everyone. Servants, nobles, even me." Her expression turned pained. The trauma has made him see plots everywhere, even where there are none. Viola's heart twisted. Not cruelty, fear. "I understand why you tested me," Viola said softly. "You can trust me, I promise." Flora's expression softened with relief. "I believe you. That's why you passed." After Flora left, Viola remained at the table. The king hadn't always been this way. He'd been betrayed by his best friend, left paralyzed, surrounded by people he couldn't trust. Of course he was harsh. Of course he tested everyone. Flora seemed worried about his paranoia, but all Viola felt was compassion. She knew what it felt like to be betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you. He needed patience, loyalty that didn't waver, someone who wouldn't give up on him. Viola stood, straightening her apron with quiet resolve. She would be that person, not because she pitied him, but because she understood what it meant to be hurt by people you trusted. Chapter 4. Viola hummed as she dusted the shelves in the king's office. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, painting everything gold. This place, this work, it was good. The king sat at his desk, papers spread before him. He kept sending her annoyed glances, but she was lost in her task and her tune. Then she started singing. "Will you stop with the singing?" Emrys snapped. Viola startled, clutching the feather duster to her chest. "So sorry, Your Majesty. I find it helps me concentrate. You know when you have a task and your brain just kind of checks out? Housework is a lot like that." She trailed off. "Not that you do much housework yourself, of course." Heat flooded her face. She fiddled with the feather duster, sending feathers floating to the floor. "No, I can't imagine you in an apron feather duster in hand." She paused. "Actually, I can imagine that quite well." The corner of his lip pulled up, just barely. Viola's eyes widened. "Ha! Was that a smile?" "It was not," Emrys said, his face straight again. But Viola felt triumphant. She'd cracked his hard exterior, and she was about to tell him exactly that when her foot caught on the rug. She stumbled forward, knocking correspondence from his desk. Papers scattered everywhere. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," Viola dropped to her knees, frantically gathering them. "Don't read those!" Emrys's voice was sharp, paranoia flaring. Viola dropped the papers immediately, eyes downcast. "Of course, Your Majesty. You need not worry." Her voice came out small. "I can't read." Emrys glared at her, mistrust radiating, but shame radiated from her, hunched shoulders, downcast eyes. My family didn't find me important enough to invest in my education. The simple honesty made something in his chest twist. He believed her. His shoulders relaxed. "An education is one's greatest weapon." Viola sighed, showing her empty palms. "Alas, I am unarmed." Emrys moved forward in his wheelchair, hooking a finger under her chin, lifting her gaze to his. "Then I will teach you." The palace library became Viola's favorite place. She met Emrys there every evening, and at first the lessons were stilted, awkward. But slowly, she began to improve. Tonight she approached with a stack of books, pretty ones with embossed covers. As she neared the table, her foot caught on her dress. She went down hard, books cascading around her. "Not again," she groaned. Emrys wheeled to her side, and she could have sworn she heard him trying not to laugh. "Are you all right?" Viola stared at the scattered books, horrified. "Oh, the books, the beautiful books." She gathered them like precious jewels. "Never mind the books," Emrys said. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. Emrys picked up one near his wheel, a deep red tome, and frowned at the spine. "This is a book on accounting." Viola turned completely pink. Emrys stared at her. Then, for the first time since she'd known him, he laughed, deep from his belly, so unexpected that Viola started laughing with him. The sound echoed through the library, bright and free. Autumn arrived, painting the trees amber and gold. Viola had settled into a comfortable rhythm with the king. She knew when he wanted silence, when he'd tolerate her chatter, when her humming soothed him. One afternoon she dusted while he worked. Without thinking, she began to hum. She caught herself and turned sharply. "Sorry, Your Majesty." He glanced up, voice gruff. "It's all right. Your voice isn't totally unpleasant." Viola suppressed a grin. Coming from him, that was poetry. She turned back, singing quietly. When he didn't object, her voice grew stronger. The library sessions continued as days grew shorter. Viola's reading improved dramatically. She found herself looking forward to their evenings together more than she should. Late one night, they read a children's story about two young wolves triumphing over an evil king. Viola was acutely aware of how close they sat, the heat between them. She tried to focus on the words, but her mind wandered to his fingers, long and elegant despite the scars. Her cheeks heated. "You were doing so well," Emrys said, misreading her blush. "Keep going." She read on, finishing with only 2 stumbles. When she reached the end, she turned to him with pride. He smiled, but sadness lurked behind his expression. "Are you all right?" Viola asked gently. He stared at the pages, fingers tracing the illustration. Finally, he spoke. "It was a favorite of Seamus's when we were boys." His voice was quiet, distant. He always believed that good would win, that love conquers all. He shook his head. I wonder what he would think now. Viola's heart ached. Her hand trembled as she laid it on his arm. "Thank you for sharing that with me," she whispered. Their eyes met. The air shifted, charged with something new. Her breath caught. His gaze dropped to her lips for just a fraction of a second. Just as she thought he might kiss her, he turned back to the book. The leaves turned crimson, then began to fall. Viola had been at the palace over 2 months now. One afternoon, Emrys was bent over his desk, writing frantically. She sang a cheerful song as she worked. Then she paused, glancing over her shoulder. Emrys was absorbed in his work, not paying her notice, but he was singing along. Quietly, under his breath, his deep voice harmonizing unconsciously. Viola's heart soared. She continued with her chores, picking up the song. Emrys remained none the wiser, still humming along. She smiled from ear to ear. The first frost came with deep cold. The palace grew darker earlier, and Viola worried about the king working too late. She'd taken to bringing him tea most nights. Tonight the palace was quiet when she knocked. "Come in." He was working by candlelight, dark circles shadowing his eyes. "I thought you might like some tea," Viola said. When Emrys smiled, really smiled, his eyes crinkled. He moved papers aside for her to set down the cup. He held up a sheet of paper, showing her. She read it aloud slowly. Most came easily now, though one word stumped her. "It's a village on the border," Emrys explained patiently. "Their harvest was poor. I'm sending supplies to help them through winter." Viola studied his profile in candlelight. His sharp jaw, how his expression softened when he spoke of his people. Over these months, she'd watched him work himself to exhaustion for his kingdom. She'd seen him make difficult decisions, heard him worry about families he'd never met but felt responsible for. She'd glimpsed who he really was beneath his tough exterior. Someone who cared so deeply it hurt. Someone who carried the weight of a kingdom and refused to let anyone suffer if he could prevent it. Her heartbeat pounded loud in the quiet room. She realized, with startling clarity, that somewhere in these months of lessons and laughter, of songs and small kindnesses, she'd fallen completely in love with him. Chapter 5. It felt like history repeating itself. Emrys paced his personal chamber, rubbing his face with both hands. He looked disheveled, distressed, his room in disarray with the bed unmade and several books strewn across the floor. He'd been like this for hours, unable to settle, unable to think straight. He clutched his heart. The pain drove him to his knees. His eyes flashed silver, his wolf rising to the surface, before returning to their natural gray. "She can't be." His voice came out rough, disbelieving. He shook his head as if arguing with something inside himself. "She can't be my mate." As the words left his mouth, another wave of pain seized his chest. Denying the truth of their mate bond caused him physical agony, his wolf snarling and clawing at him from within. He thought about the night before, Viola bringing him tea as he worked late, the soft concern in her eyes, the gentle way she'd smiled at him. Her thoughtfulness warmed something in him he'd thought frozen beyond repair. Rising unsteadily to his feet, he crossed the room with less frantic energy and looked out the window at his kingdom spread below. He gave voice to his thoughts, speaking to the empty room. "She's so good, but someone so full of goodness is easily manipulated." An old memory surfaced unbidden, him and Seamus working late into the night, devising battle plans. The work had been serious, life and death, but Seamus had always been able to make him smile, always lightened the burden. The memory shifted, morphing into something that hadn't happened yet, a dream of the future. Instead of Seamus by his side, Viola was his Luna. Rather than devising battle plans, they were out meeting the subjects of his kingdom. She was beloved by his people. Of course she was. She would soften his image, balance his harshness with her gentle warmth. He saw them tending to the less fortunate together. A child in Viola's arms, their child. A feral growl tore from his throat, shattering the vision, because the fantasy easily twisted into something darker. Viola in the throne room, his crown on her head, a bloody knife in her hand, his body at her feet. Just like Seamus, just like... "That isn't Viola," he said violently, shaking his head. "That isn't her." But how could he be sure? How could he ever be certain? Emrys sank back onto his bed and stared up at the canopy above him. His future felt like it stood on a forked road. One path led to Viola, to warmth and laughter, and someone who saw him, truly saw him. The other path stretched out alone into darkness. And he knew, with a certainty that terrified him, that if he didn't choose her, he would be alone forever. His wolf would accept no other mate. But the risk, God's the risk. He closed his eyes, exhaustion finally catching up to him. "One more test," he whispered to the empty room. "Just one more." Chapter 6. It was late, the palace wrapped in darkness. Viola knocked on the king's office door, cup of tea in hand. It had become their routine, a small ritual that felt precious to her. But tonight, there was no answer. She chewed her bottom lip, uncertain. She always waited for permission to enter. But concern pierced through her hesitation. What if something had happened? Ever so slowly, she opened the door and peeked inside. Relief flooded through her when she saw Emrys dozing by the fire, his head tilted, a blanket draped over his lap. He worked so hard, pushed himself to exhaustion. Of course he'd fallen asleep at his desk. Viola entered quietly. As she neared, she took in his profile. Strong features softened in sleep, tension finally gone from his jaw. She could see a gentleness in him now that hadn't been there months ago. Her eyes flared silver just for a moment as her wolf stirred and whispered, "Mate." The word should have frightened her. Too soon, too fast, too much. But Viola had learned patience, and she would wait as long as he needed. Gently, she placed the teacup beside him. His dinner plate sat there too, and she reached to tidy it away. Then she faltered. A beautiful gold pocket watch lay on the table, catching the firelight. Gorgeous, priceless. Definitely a family heirloom. She glanced at Emrys, still sleeping, and sighed. Had he been lost in memories tonight? She hoped they were happy ones. Her eyes filled with tears. She just wanted him to be happy. She brushed away the tears and stacked the used plates, careful not to disturb the pocket watch. With the table tidied, Viola turned to leave, but she paused. His blanket was slipping off his lap. Her heart thundered. She set down the plates and edged nearer. The closer she got, the more her blood heated, the more she longed to touch him. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the blanket to his shoulders. Leaning over him, she paused. This close, she could see the faint scars on his hands, the exhaustion etched into his features. "You're so brave, Emrys," Viola whispered, the fire crackling softly. "You've kept going despite everything. It's one of the things that makes you a great ruler." Her voice hitched, growing quieter. "It's one of the reasons why I'm falling in love with you." Tenderly, she stroked his fingers where they rested on the wheelchair arm. "Wheelchair or not," Viola said softly, "you're the strongest man I've ever known." When she went to withdraw, Emrys's hand shot out and caught her wrist. His eyes opened, fully awake, fully alert. "You love me?" Viola's heart stopped. Mortification crashed over her. "Your Majesty, I thought you were asleep." "You love me?" Emrys repeated, his grip tightening slightly, insistent. "I shouldn't have said. It was inappropriate." Viola tried to pull away, desperate to flee. In her haste, counterbalanced by Emrys still holding her wrist, she stumbled and landed in his lap. "Viola," Emrys said, "look at me." She forced herself to meet his gaze. "Did you mean it?" Emrys asked quietly. She could lie. But as she looked into his gray eyes, she found she couldn't. "Yes," Viola whispered. "Why?" Emrys asked. The question came out almost helpless. "I've been nothing but harsh to you, suspicious, demanding—" "Because I know you," Viola interrupted, finding her courage. "I know how much you care about your people, how hard you work, how lonely you are." Her voice softened. "How brave you are, every single day, choosing to keep going despite everything." Emrys stared at her, something cracking in his expression. "You don't have to say anything," Viola said quickly. "I know it's too soon. I know you might not—" "I love you too," Emrys said. The words hung between them. Viola's breath caught. Emrys's free hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "I love you too, Viola. I've been telling myself it was too fast, too dangerous, that I couldn't trust it." His gray eyes held hers, vulnerable. "But my wolf knows, has known for weeks. You're my mate." Tears spilled down Viola's cheeks. "Your mate?" "My mate," Emrys confirmed, resting his forehead against hers. They stayed like that, eyes closed, breathing each other's air. When he pulled back, his voice trembled. "Marry me?" Viola's eyes snapped open. An elated giggle escaped, pure joy bubbling up. Emrys growled, but there was warmth in it. "You're laughing at me?" he asked. "Only because I'm so happy I don't know what else to do," Viola said, beaming through tears. A genuine grin spread across Emrys's face. "Is that a yes?" "Of course it is," Viola breathed. He kissed her then, softly at first, almost reverently. But when she responded, winding her arms around his neck, the kiss deepened. Contentment settled over her like a blanket. This was what she'd dreamed of, being held, being loved, being chosen. But even as she breathed in his scent, a small voice whispered in the back of her mind, "This is so fast." She loved him, She knew that with certainty. But was 3 months enough time? Did he truly love her, or was he clinging to one of the few people he felt he could trust? He said, "You're his mate," she reminded herself. "That's not something you can fake." But the doubt remained, small but persistent. She pushed it down, willing herself to simply feel the moment. Everything would be all right. It had to be. Chapter 7. Emrys found himself smiling in the palace kitchen as Benedict presented him with a small dish, steam rising in delicate spirals. Emrys dipped a spoon into it and brought it to his mouth. "It's delicious," he praised. "Viola will love it." The chef smiled warmly and continued packing parcels of food into a wicker basket. Emrys watched, eager to show Viola how much last night had meant to him. He'd tested her before, leaving valuables around while pretending to sleep. But she'd simply adjusted his blanket and confessed her love, thinking him unconscious. She'd passed every test without even knowing they were tests. And now it was time to let go of old fears and finally be happy with the women he loved. "Brother!" Flora entered the kitchen, offering her hand with a full smile. "I hear congratulations are in order," she smiles. Emrys smiled. "I never thought it was possible to trust again after Seamus," he said. But Viola changed that. Flora's attention drifted to the growing pile of food. "She does seem perfect, doesn't she?" she said, giving him a careful smile. Emrys bristled. Why was she looking at him like something was wrong? Something he should have seen by now? Some of his good mood faded. "What is it?" he snapped. Flora hesitated. "I just don't want to see you hurt when she's disappointed," she said. "Disappointed?" Emrys asked, crossing his arms. "It's just... Viola's happy now." Flora bit her lip. "But how will she feel in a month, a year, when your wolves can never run together? When she truly realizes how limited you are?" Emrys grinned his teeth. "She's always known me in this chair, Flora. She doesn't mind it." He shrugged. "We have all of our lives to figure it out. We're thinking of a spring wedding." Flora gave a dry laugh. "Well, she certainly hasn't wasted any time," she muttered. Emrys narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean by that?" Flora walked around the kitchen table. All traces of Emrys's good humor vanished. "Nothing at all, brother," she said. "It's only happened so fast is all. I'm happy you've dropped this silly business about her being some pawn planted by her family. They clearly have nothing to gain." She paused. "Nor is she trying to claim vengeance, I don't think." Emrys felt his chest tighten. "Vengeance?" Flora shrugged casually. "It was terrible the way her family treated her, wasn't it? Casting her aside like nothing. As Luna, she'll have the power to enact revenge, do anything she likes. One might have done anything to get that kind of leverage. For revenge, you know. Even marry someone they didn't truly love." Flora glanced at Emrys, who had lost the ability to breathe. "Oh, but not your Viola. I'm sure it has nothing to do with that." She chuckled and shook her head. "It seems Seamus's betrayal affected me more than I thought. Silly me. Someone as perfect as Viola would never harbor such an agenda." Flora moved toward the door. "Have a nice picnic." And on that his sister left. Emrys stared at the picnic basket, frozen. Old emotions rose like a tidal wave. "Would you like the basket taken to the veranda, Your Majesty?" Benedict asked. Emrys's voice came out cold. "I'm afraid I've lost my appetite." He examined his memories of last night. Viola's gentle confession when she thought he was sleeping. What if she'd laid a trap, knowing he was awake? No, that was ridiculous. She'd been genuine. Hadn't she? Flora's voice rang in his mind. "She seems perfect." Emrys's jaw clenched. He had to know. Had to be absolutely certain before he bound himself to her forever. One more test, just one last time. Chapter 8. Viola sat alone in her bedroom, brushing her hair in the mirror when a knock at her door startled her from her reverie. "The king requests you in the throne room, my lady," a female attendant said. Viola smoothed her dress and left her room with growing excitement. She hadn't seen him all day. She entered the throne room, her eyes immediately searching for Emrys in his wheelchair. But she found only a tall figure examining a tapestry on the far wall. She was about to leave when the man turned, his voice affecting an overly confident tone. "My lady," he greeted. Reluctantly, Viola moved fully into the room and gave him a small curtsy. "Forgive me, my lord, but I'm looking for His Majesty the King." "Nonsense," the man said, striding closer with easy confidence. "My cousin can wait." He smiled, broad and brilliant, and Viola stood still in shock because that's when she noticed it. He looked just like Emrys, the same dark hair, the same strong features, the same gray eyes, but standing, walking toward her with powerful, easy strides. "Cousin?" she repeated, confused. She found herself moving closer to him, examining his handsome face. "Your resemblance is uncanny." The man gave an easy laugh. "Yes, when we were younger, people confused us all the time." Then he frowned, something dark crossing his expression. "That was before, of course. Emrys is much changed now. Allow me to introduce myself, Lord Brennan, at your service." Viola felt heat in the small space between them. When he took her hand in his, her body reacted strangely. He even felt like Emrys somehow, and it confused her, made her uncomfortable. "The cousin you knew is still in there. He's been through a lot, that's all," she said. Lord Brennan didn't release her hand. Instead, he stared at her with heated intensity that made her squirm. "Tell me," he said, his voice dropping lower. "How did he do it? How did a man in a wheelchair capture your heart? You're so beautiful, you must have had other offers." Viola flushed, this time succeeding in pulling her hand away. "You flatter me, sir, but that's an inappropriate question," she said. Lord Brennan gave her no quarter, though, moving closer. Viola found herself backing up until she was pressed against the wall. She hated that her body reacted to his proximity, some confused part of her wolf responding to something familiar in him, like her own desire was betraying her. Lord Brennan leaned in close, and the feeling grew worse. "He's half a man, my lady," he whispered against her ear. "He can't please you, not the way you deserve." Viola gasped, stunned, silent. "Let me give that to you," Lord Brennan added, cupping her cheek. Disgust and fury flooded through Viola. She shoved Lord Brennan away with all her strength. "How dare you assume what would please me?" Viola said, her voice shaking with anger. "The king is twice, no, 3 times the wolf you are. His wheelchair doesn't make him less of a man, but your cruelty makes you less of one." She was so angry she was shaking. And then Lord Brennan's features began to shift. The face remained the same, but something in the posture changed. The expression, the way he held himself. "Viola," he said, reaching for her. "Get out!" Viola screamed, pointing to the door. The Lord held up his palms. "Viola," he said, contrite. "It's me, Emrys. Forgive me, but I had to be sure." So many emotions crashed through Viola's mind and heart. She was breathless, barely able to comprehend what had just happened. "Emrys?" she asked, searching his face, then looking down, she added, "You can walk?" Emrys tried to move toward her, but she kept backing away. "I couldn't trust anyone," he said. "But you've proven yourself again and again. You passed, Viola." Viola went still. A cold shiver ran down her spine. "I passed?" she repeated. Emrys stumbled over his words. "I was already convinced of your loyalty. The breakfast test, leaving the watch out while I pretended to sleep, you passed all of those." Viola's world felt like it was slipping out from beneath her. She listened in stunned silence as he went on. "But then Flora mentioned your family and my wheelchair, and I just thought she had a point, perhaps a final test." "Enough!" Viola cried. "When will it be enough? You tried to seduce me. Would you have seen it through? Would you have abused my honor to prove a point, knowing that my wolf longs for yours?" Emrys looked devastated. "No, that wasn't... Viola, it wasn't like that. I just needed to know you truly loved me." She could barely speak, so crushed by the betrayal that words felt impossible. "If you doubted it, then you should have talked to me, Emrys. We could have overcome your doubts together, but instead you chose to trick me." Viola shook her head. "I can't marry someone who will test me forever," she added. "I deserve someone who believes in me." Emrys reached for her again, desperation crossing his features, but Viola evaded him. She fled the room, her vision blurred with tears, her heart broken into pieces. Chapter 9. Viola lay on her bed, sobbing, her heart torn in two. She was in love with Emrys, deeply in love. But she didn't know how their relationship could ever work now that the trust they'd built was destroyed. How could she marry someone who would test her forever? A knock sounded at her door and heart plummeted. She wasn't ready to see Emrys, couldn't face him yet. Relief flooded through her when she saw Flora standing there instead, her expression full of concern. "My brother is an idiot," Flora declared. "I'm so sorry for what he did, Viola. These tests of his, the paranoia has consumed him." Viola squeezed Flora's hand. "You've done nothing to apologize for," she said. "But I just don't think there's a way back from this. He'll never trust me." Flora shook her head. "He doesn't trust anyone. I keep telling him enough is enough, but I can only reassure him so much. He was convinced you could never truly love him the way he is." Viola nodded, but something uncomfortable settled into her chest. "I can't believe he set up yet another test for you," Flora went on. "The audacity when all you've ever done is show him kindness." Viola kept a neutral face while trying to think. Emrys had said Flora had been the one to suggest another test, but now Flora was saying it was his idea all along. One of them was lying. But who? If Emrys wanted to hide the truth from Viola, he wouldn't have revealed himself as Lord Brennan at all. But if Flora was the one lying, well, Viola tried to rationalize. Flora was attempting to comfort, that's all. But a prickle of wariness running down her spine. "I'm not sure I can stay here right now," she said, noticing Flora was waiting for her to speak. "I don't think I can handle seeing him." Flora nodded a little too eagerly. "He'll never let you leave, that's for sure," she said, fumbled in her skirts. She pulled out a small vial containing tinted purple liquid. "Here, take this." Viola stared at the vial. "I have trouble sleeping sometimes," Flora explained quickly. "This is a simple sleeping draft I use. Take it to Emrys in his tea tonight, and then you'll be able to slip away unimpeded. By the time he wakes, you can be far from here," Flora added. "I'll cover for you. Have a carriage wait outside." Viola took the vial slowly, turning it over in her hand. "Thank you, Flora," she said, holding back a frown. "You're very kind." Flora smiled. "For what's worth," she said. "I'm sorry to see you go, Viola." She squeezed her shoulder before leaving. Viola sat alone, examining the bottle. Her suspicions had crystallized into something sharper. Flora's eagerness to help her leave felt wrong. She was always so loyal to Emrys, but now she was suggesting Viola drugged him? And this vial? Why would Flora conveniently carry it in her skirts? Viola pocketed the vial, her heart beginning to race. She needed facts before making any judgments. She would take it to the apothecary to have it analyzed. Just to be certain. Viola moved quickly through the palace corridors, her mind racing. If Flora was lying, if this wasn't a sleeping draft. Then she heard voices ahead. "You need to sleep, dear brother," Flora's voice carried down the corridor. "You're exhausted," she said. Viola stopped dead in her tracks as Flora and Emrys came into view, the latter back in his wheelchair. Flora's eyes moved from Viola's face to the apothecary's door, then down to the vial clutched in Viola's hand. Flora's face went pale, then red. For a moment, she looked truly stunned, as though she hadn't expected this at all. Then Flora's eyes narrowed. Viola watched her expression shift from panic to something cold and cunning, and she pointed at the vial, her voice rising to a shriek. "Poison!" she exclaimed. Emrys's head whipped toward Viola, confusion flooding his features. "What?" he asked. Viola's mind worked quickly. "Why would you assume it's poison?" she asked Flora. The princess's voice turned sharp. "Are you denying it?" she snapped. "I wouldn't know what it is," Viola said carefully. "Unlike you." Emrys looked between them, tension radiating from his frame. "What is going on?" Flora recovered quickly, her voice taking on an urgent, concerned tone. "Brother, I've been suspecting Viola of wanting to poison you. I've had her tailed and learned that she'd been meeting with the apothecary. Now I know why, to get poison." "This is ridiculous," Viola said, her voice rising. "We'd just gotten into a fight. I was going to leave." "You were?" Emrys's voice was quiet, pained. Viola couldn't lie to him. She met his eyes. I am, but I do not wish you dead. It's the last thing I want," she said. "Then why are you carrying poison?" Flora demanded. "Because you gave it to me," Viola exploded. Emrys went very still. He looked stunned, tense. It was a lot to take in and accept. Viola realized the impossible position she was in. Flora was his beloved sister, his twin, his only ally. And turns out she'd also been the one who had been isolating Emrys all along, feeding into his paranoia. "She gave it to me, I promise," Viola said desperately, turning to Emrys. "She told me it was a sleeping draft to help me escape." "I would never poison my own brother," Flora said, her voice trembling with what sounded like genuine hurt. "Again, how do you even know it's poison?" Viola challenged, her voice sharp. Emrys's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of curiosity crossing his face. Flora saw it too. "Are you saying it isn't?" Flora challenged back. "I'm saying I wouldn't know," Viola said firmly, "but you seem very certain." "Well, you won't mind tasting it then," Flora said, her voice turning cold. It was flawed logic. Viola could see that. Flora was desperate, trying to push her into a corner too quickly for Emrys to think it through. "I think it's poison because you say it is," Viola said, turning back to Emrys. "She gave it to me. How would she know it's poison if she didn't give it to me herself?" Emrys turned slowly to Flora, doubt creeping across his features. Flora's face twisted. There was a pregnant pause, a suspended moment where it seemed impossible to determine what would happen. Then, with a feral scream, Flora lunged at Viola. A knife flashed in her hand. She'd been hiding it in her sleeve all along. Viola saw it approach, frozen in shock. "No!" Emrys screamed. He launched himself from the wheelchair, catching Flora by the wrist mid-lunge. They crashed together against the wall, and Flora stared, shock replacing rage. "You can walk?" she asked. "How long have you been able to walk?" The pieces were falling into place. Viola could see it happening in real time, Emrys's face shifting from confusion to horror to devastating understanding. Emrys stood frozen, staring at his sister. "It was you all along, wasn't it? You turned Seamus against me." Flora's pretty features twisted into something ugly. "He loved me," she spat. "He loved me more than you, can you believe it? All our lives, everyone's always been focused on you, the heir, the boy, but Seamus loved me more and you had him killed." "Because he confessed to poisoning me," Emrys growled, "which you pushed him to do. You encouraged him, didn't you?" "Why?" "Because it should have been me," Flora spat, still struggling against his grip. "I was born first. The throne should be mine." "Guards!" Viola screamed. Palace guards rushed into the corridor, pulling Flora from Emrys's grasp. She thrashed against them like a wild animal. Flora gave one final wrench against the guards, her face contorted with rage and grief. "I would have been a better ruler, but no, you get everything just because you're male?" "Perhaps," Emrys said quietly. "But you could have told me how you felt. Instead, you tried to have me killed." The guards dragged Flora down the corridor. Her screams echoed off the stone walls until they finally faded into silence. Chapter 10. 2 days later, while Flora waited to stand trial, Viola stood in the entrance hall, her small bag packed. The carriage waited outside, horses stamping impatiently in the cold morning air. "Viola," a voice called. She closed her eyes at the sound of his voice. Running footsteps echoed through the hall. She turned slowly. Emrys stood at the top of the grand staircase, breathing hard and standing on his own 2 legs openly again. "Viola, please," he said. "Wait." He looked like he hadn't slept. Good. Neither had she. "I'm leaving," Viola said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I can't be here." Emrys descended quickly. "Please, you don't have to go." "You pretended to seduce me, Emrys." Viola cut him off. "You used our bond against me, so yes, I do have to go. How am I supposed to trust you after that?" His face crumpled. "I don't expect you to trust me," Emrys said desperately. He stopped a few feet away as if afraid coming closer would make her bolt. "I destroyed that, I know, but please, don't leave, stay." Viola shook her head and pulled the engagement ring from her pocket and held it out. "I can't marry someone who will test me for the rest of my life," she said. Emrys looked at the ring like it was a death sentence. "You deserve so much better than me." He agreed, his voice breaking. "You deserve someone who trusts you completely. Someone who would never hurt you the way I did." He took a shaky breath. "But I'm begging you. Please stay and give me a chance to become that person." He dropped to his knees right there in the entrance hall. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll spend every day trying to earn it if you'll just stay." Viola stared at him kneeling before her, and part of her wanted to walk away. But a larger part, the part that still loved him despite everything, couldn't do it. She clutched her bag tighter. If I stay, it's as a guest for now, nothing more. Hope flickered across Emrys's face. The weeks that followed were a slow dance of healing. At first, Viola barely saw Emrys. He gave her true space. But then small gestures began appearing. Books left outside her door, fresh wildflowers in her room each morning, her favorite tea waiting in the library each afternoon. Emrys asked permission before sitting beside her. He helped her read with patient gentleness. Then one day he apologized. Really apologized. He told her everything about Flora, how she'd manipulated Seamus for a year, weaponizing his love, convincing him poisoning Emrys was the only way they could be together. How Seamus had saved Emrys at the last second because he couldn't go through with murder. He died protecting her, Emrys said, and I never knew the truth. Viola took his hand. They talked long into the night about betrayal, forgiveness, the complicated nature of love. And Viola began to understand. Emrys had been Flora's victim too. Isolated, traumatized, turned against the one person who genuinely cared for him. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it helped her understand why. As winter gave way to spring, something shifted. Viola would catch Emrys watching her in corridors, his expression full of longing. When she smiled at him, he'd grin back, freely, fully, like she was the only thing that mattered. The mate bond, which had been quiet and aching, began to roar to life again. Viola found herself seeking him out again. His consistent actions, his patience, his respect for her boundaries were slowly rebuilding what his betrayal had broken. One evening in the library, as they sat close over a book, Viola realized she'd forgiven him. Not because he'd proven himself enough, though he had, but because she chose to trust him. That's what love was. Choosing trust, despite the risk. So when one night, looking more handsome than he ever had, he said, "Viola, you brought me back to life. You showed me what real strength looks like. You forgave me when I didn't deserve it. You stayed when you had every right to leave. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" A tear slid down Viola's cheek and she replied, "I thought you'd never ask." Emrys lifted her off her feet and kissed her, and when they finally broke apart, breathless, Viola touched his face gently. "I love you," she whispered. "Not despite your flaws, but including them. All of you." "And you," Emrys replied. "I love you, and I trust you. Always." Under the full moon, surrounded by the first blooms of spring, they held each other. Two broken people who'd found their way back to wholeness together. And Viola knew that this time it would last. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this week's story. Before you go, a little surprise. For Black Friday, you can get 50% off your first month on Patreon with the code BlackFriday50. It's the perfect moment to unlock bonus chapters, POVs, and exclusive stories. The offer runs until next Friday. Just enter Black Friday 50 at checkout. And if you do join, come say hi in the comments so I can welcome you properly. See you soon for another story. Love, Lily.